Is it okay like this? First of all, I would like to apologize to not present this lecture in Portuguese, but in English. I would like to thank the two translators for the hard work they are doing right now. Also, I would like to warmly thank the community of organization to have invited me and for the wonderful work they did. So my presentation this morning will focus on some basic but fundamental data concerning paper. In the first part, I will describe the chemical composition and structural organization of a sheet of paper. From this description, I will draw the main chemical and physical properties. I will only briefly describe transparent papers, as Antonio Mirabile will develop it thoroughly later today. The second part of the lecture will review the main agents of degradation and how to reduce their respective impacts on collection items. Basically, a paper sheet is a web of interwoven fibers. Those fibers can be made of cellulose, hemicellulose, or lignin. Each of those compounds is a polymeric structure. In other words, it's made of the repetition of the same unit. In the case of cellulose, the unit is cellobiose. Very often, the length of those molecules is really long, and the molecule very strong. Let us now explore how to make a sheet of paper. We will insist on the two first steps, how to make the paper pulp and how to make paper sheet. The first step will determine the main chemical properties of the sheet of paper, while the second one will explain its generic physical properties. By definition, paper pulp is the suspension of fibers in water. The source of these fibers is very important. For the longest time, and in Europe, the origin of fibers was rags. Therefore, the fibers were either cotton fibers or nylon fibers. The rags were collected, sorted out, cleaned, and heated in a solution of alkali. This process was needed to destroy the fabric and to transform it into a pulp. The best source of fibers is 100% alpha cellulose fibers, meaning made of cotton. In the end of the 19th century, another source of fibers became available by processing wood chips. Wood is made of a mixture of cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. The respective weight of each varies with the wood species. While cellulose is a long and stable polymer, the two others are less stable, especially the lignin. Therefore, paper made of wood pulp will be less stable than the one made of cotton. There are two processes to transform wood chip into paper pulp. The first one breaks down the lignin, renders it soluble, and extracts it. This process is named the chemical process, as it used sulfate and or bisulfite to extract the fibers. From this pulp, strong and stable paper can be made, as the fibers are not altered. For instance, it's kraft paper. The second process solubilizes the wood fibers in water by heating and or mangling the wood. In this case, all types of fibers are suspended into water, and also they have been shortened through the intense mechanical treatment. So, in short, the fiber composition of a sheet of paper depends on one hand, the source from which the pulp is made of, and on the other hand, the process to extract the fibers and to solubilize them into water. So again, the best paper is the one made of cotton, constituted of 100% alpha cellulose fibers. In this ideal model, a fiber is a chain of cellulose made of 3,000 to 500 units of glucose. And the chemical bond between each unit of cellulose is very stable. However, the chemical bond can be broken either by acidic or oxidizing sorry, oxidizing reactants. So when the chain is broken, it produces shorter chains, very often acidic, with the tendency to be yellow. On the bottom right side of the slide, you can see the space-filling model, showing that between two long molecules of cellulose, which are parallels because it takes the less space, some molecules of waters are creating a bridge. It means that water molecules are part of the composition of the fibers. The chemical properties of a sheet of paper can be directly deduced from its fiber composition. A sheet of paper made of 100 alpha cellulose will be stable, with sensitivity to oxidation and to acidic attacks. If degraded, the paper will have shorter fibers and will lose some strength. Two degraded molecules can react, creating a bond. This is named cross-linking. The paper will then become brittle. Also, if molecules of water between the two polymers of cellulose are removed, cross-linkings will also appear with the same result, the paper becoming brittle. Also, another property, non-degraded cellulose polymers are colorless and transparent. So now that we saw the origin, the chemical composition and process to make paper pulp, let us explore how to make a sheet of paper. So we need paper pulp, we just saw, and a mold. So the bottom right scheme shows a mold made of parallel length of wire laced together with fine wire. On the left side, you see in transparency the paper resulting from this type of mold. It's, for paper conservator, lead paper, kind of known. So as you can see, there were less fibers where the chain and lead lines were, so therefore you can see a ghost in transparency, the line on the sheet of paper. Another type of mold will be made of wire mesh, and the result will be named a wove paper. Okay, how does it work? So then you put the mold into the container with the pulp. You then pull the pulp with the mold. While the water is drained out, you shake the mold. I'm doing the gesture, but with the mic, so it's complicated. So in order to even the distribution of the fibers on the mold. So this movement will give a preferential direction to the fibers to line in. So this direction is named the grain. So while the water is further drained out, the fibers will be creating some weak bonds between each other, forming the paper web that we saw previously at the beginning of the talk. So the sheet is then couched on felt and dried under pressure. Sometimes it can be further coated or calendared. The movement made to homogenize the distribution of fibers creates the grain of the paper and explains its anisotropic behavior. By definition, the term defines a difference in physical property depending on the spatial direction it's measured. The grain will be along the chain lines or along the machine direction. So the fibers will be parallel to this direction. The cross direction, or CD, is perpendicular. So now let us have a closer look to a sheet of paper. Both pictures show paper under high magnification. We can see on the left image that indeed fibers are parallel. On the right image, we see that paper is made of fibers, we knew it, but also a lot of voids. So paper, we can already say that paper is a fibrous material, non-homogeneous, anisotropic, and porous. So while the chemical properties were related to its fiber composition and extracting process, physical properties of the paper sheet are related on the way to make the pulp. The anisotropic behavior will affect both the strength and the flexibility. It will be easier, indeed, to tear the paper along the grain, between molecules. Also, the flexibility will be higher. So, paper is very absorbent and hygroscopic, meaning attracting water from the environment, because we saw there's a lot of voids. So it will have the tendency to attract the outside molecules. So the hygroscopic property is also anisotropic. For instance, after slightly spraying water on paper sheet, it will curl. It's classical. So what does it mean? It means that the difference in amplitude of the directional change induced by the water absorption depends on the direction. So as seen on the scheme at the bottom of the slide, the maximal change will occur along the cross direction, so between molecules of cellulose. I think it's logical. So paper appears colorless because it does not absorb in the visible range. It appears opaque and white due to the multiple scattering induced by the difference of refractive indexes between the fibers and the air filling the pores. So paper can be made transparent either by filling the pores with a material with a refractive index similar to the fibers, or by compacting the fibers, therefore reducing the size of the voids. There are two mechanisms to make paper translucent and two general ways to proceed. One is to work on the sheet of paper that is already formed. We saw the way to do it. The sheet will be either impregnated by oil and or resin, or will be treated chemically through sulfurization, or will be calendared by going through two heated rods. The other way is to work on the pulp. The fibers, if they are shortened, would be easier to compact. So the second way to make paper transparent involves overbeating the pulp. Antonio will treat this aspect, so I'm just moving on. So, what would be the main agents of degradation of paper-based collection, based on what we saw? We saw that paper is absorbent because of these numerous voids and pores. So therefore, pollution will be a big issue. Temperature is always speeding up degradation reaction, and its fluctuation acts with fluctuation of relative humidity, so which is the amount of moist in the air. And we saw that the paper is hygroscopic, absorbing water if there's some water around, and it will change dimension if it absorbs water. So temperature as well as relative humidity will be important agent to control. Light exposure will also be an issue, especially if there are some UV. Indeed, cellulose is absorbing within the UV. Also, paper is a very good source of food for insects and rodents and mold. So it will be important to control the three parameters. I will develop later each agent. Least but not less, is the inappropriate housekeeping. I think yesterday you saw a few examples of it, showing some contamination because the paper, the item was in contact with poor grade material. And then you saw some yellowing, especially it was in the presentation of Jean. So we will see that also later. So this is very simple, but it can create huge damage within the collection or on the item. If you mishandle an item, you can tear it apart. So basically, the ideal environment we want to create around the collection is a stable one with minimal fluctuations around values provided by preservation standards. Those values are known to be the best compromises in order to reduce degradation while maintaining access to the collection. An ideal environment is also one that can be controlled and monitored. The best and most efficient strategy is to avoid and to block the damaging agents to come closer to the collection. It concerns the building, its design, and its maintenance. If the building has a high capacity of isolation, it may be easier to control, for instance. It involves also controlling all the exchanges between the outdoor and the indoor. Very often, the outdoor temperature and the relative humidity will fluctuate a lot between day and night. So we want to avoid this fluctuation to impact the collection. So controlling exchanges means also to control all location of exchanges, and they should be sound. It affects the doors, the windows, the ventilation system, but also the incoming items that can be infected, or also the staff that can bring food. So ideally, should be conceived as a whole system protecting the collection from the outdoor damaging agents. The main strategy is to increase the number of protective layers. And also each layer should act as a physical barrier, mitigating and buffering the effects of the damaging agents. And each layer should have a specific role to play. So it's an integrated system, what I name the onion model. So the standard and recommendation we want to achieve in the best case. So temperature should be maximum 20 degrees and less in storage area. 20 degrees is a good compromise between the comfort for the visitors and the preservation of the collection. Lower, it starts to be cold for the visitor. So for storage area, lower temperature is preferred, but it's because nobody is coming too often to look at the items. Relative humidity should be between 40 and 50 degrees with minimum fluctuation. Light, no UV, it's not needed to see, so we can, if it's possible to remove all UV, it's better. And it's important to control the total exposure, meaning total exposure is the intensity by the time of exposure. So you can balance either a long time of exposure with a small intensity or a big intensity with a small time of exposure. But you have to control that. And of course, pest activity and pollution should be minimal. Okay, so let's go through each agent and see how it's possible to control or mitigate. It will be fast. So paper is porous and will absorb pollutant. So we saw that already. There are three causes of pollution. The outdoor pollution, caused very often by burning the fuels. It produces sulfur dioxide, which can react with water, resulting in strong acidic products. So you remember that cellulose is sensitive to acidic products. So we want to avoid that. The indoor pollution comes from many materials, which can, and for instance, it's off-gassing of the materials around the item and the collection. The third source is the particulate pollutants, or the dust. So the dust, it's a generic category coming with various sizes, but very often it's abrasive, so it will damage the surface of the paper. And often it's acidic, it's hygroscopic, and it's a very good source of food for insect or pest. So you want to avoid that also. Okay, so these two pictures show strong discoloration due to pollution through contact. On the left, you see what it's named matte burn. So it happens when an item is matted with a poor quality material. And it's exposed to light. So there's very often the poor quality is between the two good quality of paper that are making the phone. And with the light, you will degrade this inner layer that will start to outgas and will stain the paper. The other picture showed the back of an item which was in contact with a printed corrugated backing board. So as you can see on the back, you see the lines. So you see that it's corrugated. So the yellow lines were where it was in contact. The white lines were it was not in contact. And you see also some letters. So I didn't show the backing board, but it was printed. And the ink was protecting, in fact, the off-gassing. So the back of the item is showing that. So it's a combination of contamination due to a poor quality material with an exposure. So the light degraded the poor quality material behind the collection because paper is transparent. So this is very classical. So the most efficient way to prevent the impacts of pollutants on collection items is to filter the air coming in. It's to select the good material to put in contact with the collection item, and it's to clean the shelves, and sometimes the surface of the artifact, to remove the dust. So temperature. Most objects are not directly sensitive to temperature, but temperature change affects them indirectly. Okay. So heat speeds up chemical reaction. Heat speeds up also insect activities. And also it affects the amount of humidity in the air. The quantity of vapor that air can hold depends on temperature. The lower the air temperature, the smaller the maximum possible capacity for vapor. So relative humidity indicates how moist the air is. 100% indicates condensation, so it's liquid. Before it's vapor, it's gas, 100% it becomes liquid. So the temperature high, the relative humidity low. So relative humidity speeds up in general reaction. So you want to control it. It also promotes growth of mold. Mold, they like when it's humid. When it's dark and when it's humid, like it. In addition to that, paper is hygroscopic. So, and we saw that it will induce some change in the dimension of the paper, changing the amount of water. So paper will have the tendency to adapt and to balance the amount of water with the environment. So if the humidity relative is low, paper will release its water and will become brittle. To the contrary, if the relative humidity is high, paper will absorb water molecules and will become limp and change dimension. So the fluctuation will induce change in dimension and stress. So you want to control that, especially if there's multiple layers. For instance, like this. So the damage induced by a non-controlled change in relative humidity will be mainly about building up internal stress, which can lead to distortion. So this is a parchment. On the left, on the top image, it's a parchment. You can see it's totally distorted. And on the bottom of the slide, you see that it's a delamination, meaning that you have two layers that are not changing in the same way. They are changing dimension with the change of relative humidity, but not in the same rate. So after a while, it's delaminating. So controlling temperature and relative humidity involves most often to have a heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, and or to have a control equipment such as heater or humidifiers. It's also supposed a good maintenance system, which can be a big issue. In some cases, it can be decided to design specific climate for storage or macroclimate for display case, for instance. So if you can go general, or you can be more specific in regard to controlling the environment around either the collection or the object. So in the case of macroclimate, very often you will use silica gel to do that. So light exposure. So I will go fast on that, but it's my area of expertise, light exposure and controlling light exposure. So if after the talk you want to have more information, please come. I will be happy to be more specific. But it's a general overview, so I will be fast. So light is energy and can induce chemical reactions, degrading paper or media. Light exposure creates irreversible and cumulative damage. Cumulative damage means that once irreversible damage is done, then the next one will just add. And very often it's follow the reciprocity law, meaning that what matters is it's the total exposure. It's the light intensity by the time. And it doesn't matter if the total exposure is the same. It doesn't matter if it was due to high intensity and small time, or long intensity and long time and small intensity. It doesn't matter. What matters is the total exposure, intensity of exposure by time of exposure. So very often, light-induced damages are the color change or color appearance of the material, so fading, the biggest issue, or yellowing of the paper, and weakening or embrittlement of polymeric materials, such as cellulose or adhesive. So controlling or monitoring light exposure. So you want to filter all UV, because they are not needed for you to see and they are damaging, so you just filter them. And infrared it's heat. So you want to also reduce the heat. We saw that increase of temperature can create some damage. So you try to filter what it's not needed for you to see. So it's UV and infrared. So you want to control the total exposure, So I explained to you total exposure. And also you want to control the spectral power distribution of the light source. So this is a concept that white light source can be made of different wavelengths. Are you following us? Yeah. So the white light source can be made with UV inside or without UV. So you want to control what is the wavelength that will create your light source, and to remove the damaging ones. And then you want to monitor, so to check, because remember that the total exposure, you want to control that. So you want to check the light intensity, and you check the amount of exposure, and you record that regularly. Okay, pest. So pest is a generic term that includes rodents, insects, and mold. So in general, paper is a kind of good source of food. It's sugar, you know, cellulose. So mold will love it. So mold will digest the cellulose because it's a source of food, and this activity will break the fibers. And the paper will become weaker, because remember, if you shorten the length of polymer of the cellulose, it has a tendency the paper will lose strength, so it will become weaker. And as a side effect, the product of digestion of the mold is very often a colorful product. So the red you see, it's only a byproduct, but it's very damaging. So mold has 3 states. It can be spore, and spore it's everywhere. We have a mold everywhere here around us. We breathe it, and so spore it's a latent state that will just wait for the right condition to develop. And the right conditions are very often warm, dark, and humid. So you want to, when you are trying to, in your storage area, you want to be sure that you do not create microclimate. So for example, in corner, it can be a little dark and humid because there's not a lot of ventilation. So this can be a place where mold can grow. So you just want to inspect that. So another state of the mold is dormant or dry. So you can have on your paper some dry mold. It's dry, so it's not active, it's not such a big issue. You can clean that. But if it's active, meaning you will see it's very fibrous. If an active mold is beautiful, I think we saw some pictures of it, but it can be very dangerous for your own health. So if you have active mold, then you isolate them and you ask for a mycologist to come and to analyze them. You do not act on it directly without advices. So then another sort of infestation is insect. So luckily, very often, they do not care so much about paper. But the trouble is sometimes the paper is on the way out when it's time for them to fly. So they can create some holes. So you want to check on that. So the way to control infection is inspection first. So you look at fecal matter or body parts of insect or odor or holes or stains regularly in your collection. So then one way, if there's some signs of activity of mold or insect, then you want to contain the infection, so you separate. And to fix the source of the problem and to control the climate, very often with mold it's an issue of climate, and to contact mycologists. And then you want to treat. So it's killing the animals. So a very good recent way to do it is anoxic treatment. You remove the oxygen for a long period of time, and then you are in fact killing the insect without affecting the collection. Freezing can be also a good solution to stop the activity and to kill the animals. And then you clean the area and the items and you reinstall. What? Slow, okay. Closer, okay. Do I need to go back to? Okay, like this? And, oh, closer? Okay. So, but do you want me to go back to, was it okay, the last slide or not? Okay, I'm almost finished. So then we can, okay, sorry. Okay, so the last slide. Good. So yesterday with the two presentations we had, we saw only very good storage area. It was amazing, I think. But very often it's not like this. And we say that inappropriate housekeeping can create huge damage of the whole collection, on the whole collection. So it's very important to understand how to select the material that will be coming in contact with your collection to avoid pollution. And then it's also mishandling. It's very classical. Also, you have a big piece of paper, you are alone, and you want to do something with your big piece of paper, and you take the risk to take it alone, and then you tear it. It happened to me, huh? So it's very important also to have the right amount of staff, for instance. So this is also part of the good care of a collection. Okay, so it's the slide. Yes, so I'm aware that it was a very short overview, but I wanted to give you the logic of the composition of fiber. You have chemical properties of your items. The way to make the sheet of paper gives you the main physical properties. And from that, you can deduce the degradation, the risk of degradation. And from that, you can have a good sense of the priorities in order to take care, to have the best care for your collection. So please do not hesitate to come and ask if you want to have specific information, and I thank you for your attention.